Before we dive in, hit that subscribe button, drop a like, and tell me what you think really happened to Officer Hayes, because after tonight, you'll question everything you thought you knew about Pelican Bay. Rain slammed against the razor wire fences, and the Pacific wind howled through the corridors of Pelican Bay State Prison. The security cameras flickered, and for 37 minutes, no one could explain why. When the feed came back online, Officer Michael Hayes, one of the most respected correctional officers in the facility, was gone. Not transferred, not signed out, just gone. His key card was found near the D block, the Security Housing Unit, or SHU, where California's most dangerous inmates were kept in near-total isolation. Next to it lay a torn page from his logbook with one chilling sentence written in his handwriting. "They know what I found." The next morning, the warden locked down the entire prison. Inmates were stripped, cells searched, and every officer questioned. Yet there was no trace of Hayes, no body, no uniform, not even a single drop of blood. It was as if Pelican Bay had swallowed him whole. 2 weeks earlier, Hayes had confided in another officer, saying he was onto something big. Something about a trafficking ring operating inside the prison, run not by inmates but by people in uniform. He told his colleague he had evidence stored on a hidden USB drive. But that drive was never found. To the public, Hayes' disappearance was brushed off as a desertion. Inside the prison, though, whispers spread fast. Inmates claimed they'd seen him that night, not leaving, but being escorted into an unlit hallway near the old observation wing that hadn't been used in years. Some said he was silenced. Others swore he was still alive, somewhere in the labyrinth beneath Pelican Bay. And as the days turned into weeks, one thing became clear. The official report didn't match the reality the officers were living through. Because if Hayes really vanished, then who was it that still logged into the security system using his ID 3 nights after his disappearance? The night shift always had its own kind of silence. Not peace, but the kind that hums beneath your skin, where every echo feels like a whisper of something watching you. Officer Daniel Cross felt it heavy that night as he walked past the sealed corridor of Pelican Bay's old observation wing, a part of the prison shut down after a riot years ago. The lights here buzzed faintly, flickering against concrete walls stained with age. Cross wasn't supposed to be here, but curiosity and the memory of Hayes, his old partner, pulled him closer every night. A faint metallic sound stopped him. Tap, tap, tap. 3 slow knocks from behind a locked steel door labeled O-Wing/restricted access. Cross froze. Every instinct told him to leave, but he leaned in. "Hayes," he whispered, his breath shallow. No response. Just that same faint tapping again, followed by a voice. "Don't trust them." Cross stumbled back, flashlight trembling in his hand. The voice was faint, almost human, almost familiar, but it came from inside the sealed section. That made no sense. O-Wing had been abandoned for over a decade. The next morning, Cross filed an unofficial report to Internal Affairs about the incident. Hours later, his locker was searched, his body cam footage erased, and a simple note was left on his windshield in the staff parking lot. "Stop digging." Hayes didn't. From that day, Cross couldn't sleep. His wife said he'd started mumbling in his dreams, always repeating the same name, Hayes. He tried to act normal during his shift, but everything around him began to feel off. The guards who used to talk about Hayes had gone quiet. The sergeant who mentioned him last week was suddenly transferred to another prison down south, without warning. That night, while patrolling near the old surveillance room, Cross noticed something strange. One of the security monitors, long thought disconnected, flickered to life. The feed showed the inside of the abandoned O-Wing. Dust floated in the air, and on the far wall, written in what looked like red marker, were 3 words that made his blood run cold. They took Hayes. Cross stared at the screen, heart pounding. But before he could hit record, the monitor went black. When he looked up, he realized something even worse. Someone was standing behind him in the reflection of the glass. Officer Cross spun around, flashlight raised. The beam cut through the dark, but the hallway was empty. No footsteps, no breathing, nothing but the hum of distant generators. Still, the reflection had been real. He could have sworn it. a figure in uniform, motionless, watching him. He tried to shake it off, but paranoia had a way of clinging to a man in Pelican Bay. The prison wasn't just concrete and steel. It was secrets layered on top of secrets, like the walls themselves were keeping score of every lie. Cross went home early that night, but his mind didn't rest. He pulled out Hayes' old shift logs, which he had secretly photocopied weeks ago, back when Hayes first mentioned the trafficking ring. The entries looked normal until he noticed something hidden. Every few pages, a single letter in the margins had been marked with a pen. When he connected them, they formed two words: Blood Key. Cross didn't understand it at first, but after digging through old archives, he found an internal memo from 2011, the year Pelican Bay's O Wing was officially shut down. It referenced a covert security clearance system that had been codenamed Blood Key, a biometric access project meant only for high-ranking officers. The project was never approved by the state. That's when it hit him. Hayes must have discovered the program still existed and that someone was using it. The next day, Cross returned to the prison and bribed the IT tech to show him the security logs for the previous month. Every access attempt to O-Wing came up red, denied. Except for one. A single entry, timestamped 2:14 a.m., 2 nights before Hayes vanished. Access granted. User, M. Hayes. Cross's stomach turned. That meant Hayes entered O-Wing, willingly or not, just before disappearing. He needed proof. That night, after the count cleared, Cross made his move. He snuck down the maintenance corridor, passing through layers of rusted grates and stale air until he reached the sealed steel door marked O-Wing/restricted access. He pressed his ID to the scanner. Nothing. Then, on impulse, he pressed his thumb against it. The scanner beeped once, then flashed green. The door hissed open. A cold draft rushed past him, carrying the stench of iron and mildew. His flashlight trembled as it cut through the darkness. The walls were lined with decaying medical cabinets and discarded restraints. The deeper he went, the louder a faint buzzing sound became, electrical, rhythmic like a heartbeat through metal. He followed it to the end of the corridor, where a single chair sat under a dangling bulb. And there, taped to the seat, was a USB drive labeled Blood Key/Hayes. Cross reached for it, but just as his fingers touched the cold plastic, the lights shut off. The buzzing stopped. Then a voice echoed behind him, low, familiar, and impossible. "Daniel, you shouldn't have come here." Cross froze, heart pounding so loud he could barely hear the voice again. It was Hayes, or at least it sounded like him. But that couldn't be. Hayes had been gone for almost a month. The darkness pressed in around him, thick and suffocating. His flashlight flickered once, then again, before stabilizing on the far wall. That's when he saw the outline of a man. Pale face, torn uniform, eyes wild with exhaustion. "Hayes?" Cross whispered. The figure didn't move. Then, slowly, it lifted a trembling hand and pointed toward the far end of the corridor, where a metal door stood half open, a red warning light blinking above it. Cross hesitated. "What's in there?" But Hayes didn't answer. He just stared at him, expression hollow, like someone who'd seen too much. Cross took a step forward, gripping the USB drive tightly. "I can get you out of here," he said. "Tell me what you found." Hayes' lips parted, and a single word escaped. "Evidence." Then the lights blinked again, and he was gone. The door at the end of the corridor creaked open wider. Cross followed, stepping into what looked like an old evidence room, long forgotten, dust-covered, and filled with file boxes stamped internal operations/confidential. On one of the shelves sat a monitor connected to an ancient desktop. Cross plugged in the USB drive and waited. The screen came to life, revealing encrypted folders labeled Internal Transfers, Warden Directives, Blood Key, Active Users. Cross clicked the last one. His eyes widened. There were 8 active users on the Blood Key system. 3 names were blacked out. 2 were labeled Retired, and 1, at the bottom, made his stomach twist. User ID 004D Cross. He wasn't supposed to be in the system. He'd never even heard of Blood Key until Hayes mentioned it. Then, the monitor began to glitch. A text file opened on its own, and lines began appearing as if someone were typing live. You were never supposed to see this. Hayes tried to expose it. Now it's your turn. Cross yanked the drive out, breathing fast. The screen froze, displaying one last line. Room 39, East Archive. He turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind him. Heavy footsteps echoed from the hallway, measured, deliberate. Through the sliver of the door's window, he saw a flashlight beam sweep past. Two voices murmured. "Command wants him alive," one said. "Not if he's seen the files," replied the other. Cross backed away slowly, gripping his radio, but it was dead. No signal, no escape. He looked around the room. Only one option remained. A small maintenance vent behind the evidence racks, half covered in dust. As the handle on the door began to turn, Cross dropped to his knees and crawled in. Behind him, the door burst open, and the voices called out his name. Cross crawled through the narrow vent, his breath echoing off cold metal. Every movement scraped and groaned, and each sound felt like a flare in the silence. Behind him, he could still hear the muffled shouts of the officers searching the evidence room, men he once trusted. He dropped into an old utility hall beneath the East Block, a forgotten artery of Pelican Bay. The air was damp, the concrete slick with condensation. Somewhere above, the intercom crackled with static. The voice of the night sergeant echoed faintly. "Lockdown sectors C through F. Cross is armed and unstable." "Repeat. Officer Daniel Cross is considered a threat." He wasn't the hunter anymore. He was the prey. Cross moved carefully, following the faint stenciled markings on the wall until he saw it. A rusted metal door marked Room 39, East Archive. He hesitated. The number pulsed in his mind like a curse. Inside, the room was colder than anywhere else in the prison. Metal shelves lined the walls, filled with sealed folders and dusty binders. In the center, an old table held a set of labeled evidence bags, each containing stacks of unmarked bills, phone records, and photos of guards shaking hands with known gang leaders. Hayes had been right. The trafficking ring was real. It was run from inside Pelican Bay's own security office. Cross pulled out his phone, snapping pictures of everything. But as his camera clicked, he noticed something strange. One of the evidence bags was labeled with today's date. He leaned closer. Inside the bag was a blood-stained ID card. His ID card. He stumbled back, panic surging. They had planned this. The system wasn't just covering up Hayes. It was framing him next. Then came the sound. Heavy boots approaching the hallway outside. Cross darted for cover behind a shelf, just as two guards entered, their radios whispering. "You sure he came this way?" "Command said room 39. Close it down after." They began checking shelves one by one. Cross reached into his jacket pocket and felt the USB drive. His only leverage. His only proof. The guard stopped just feet away. One of them, Sergeant Heller, stepped forward. Cross remembered his voice from the radio. "You think you're a hero, Cross?" Heller's tone was calm, almost mocking. Hayes thought that too. "You know where he is now?" Cross didn't move. Heller smiled. "Right where you're standing." He fired a shot into the floor beside the table, the echo ricocheting down the hall. Dust fell from the ceiling. Cross used the noise to his advantage, bolting for the side vent. Bullets tore through the shelves as he dove inside, crawling toward the faint glimmer of light at the other end. He burst out into the open maintenance yard, gasping for air. The night was cold, the fog rolling thick off the coast. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. He clutched the USB drive in his hand and whispered, "I'll finish what you started, Hayes." But as he turned toward the outer gate, a flashlight beam cut across his face. Standing there, aiming a gun straight at him, was the warden. The beam of the flashlight froze Cross where he stood. The warden's voice carried through the fog, cold and steady. "Drop it, Daniel." Cross didn't move. The USB drive felt like it was burning in his hand. "You think you're the first one who's tried to play hero," the warden said, stepping closer. Hayes made the same mistake. He thought this place ran on justice. Cross's pulse pounded in his ears. "Where is he?" The warden gave a quiet laugh. Not cruel, but tired, like someone explaining a rule to a child. "Gone. buried under paperwork and sealed reports. The system needed a villain, not a whistleblower. Cross tightened his grip on the drive. You used him. You killed him. Watch your words, officer. The warden's gun didn't waver. I protected this institution. You think the public wants to know what really happens here? You think the state would survive that kind of truth? Cross took a slow step forward. I don't care about the state. I care about what you did to him. The warden lowered the flashlight slightly, his face now visible, lined with age and power, but his eyes, they were hollow. Hayes was supposed to hand over the drive. He refused, said he'd take it to the press. I gave him a chance to walk away. Cross's voice cracked. You didn't let him walk away, did you? The warden's silence was answer enough. You're standing in a graveyard of good men, Daniel, he said finally. The Blood Key program was built to control, not expose. You think you can burn it down? It'll bury you before sunrise. Cross exhaled slowly, his mind racing. He couldn't win this fight. Not here, not now. But maybe he didn't need to. He slipped his hand into his vest pocket, pressing the small transmitter button on his radio. It looked dead, but it wasn't. He'd re-rigged the mic before entering room 39. Everything the warden said was now being streamed to the central security servers. I don't need to burn it down, Cross said. You just lit the match yourself. The warden's eyes widened as he realized. He fired, the shot echoing through the yard. Cross dropped behind a concrete barrier, clutching his shoulder, pain ripping through him. Alarms blared across the compound. Lights flooded the yard as guards poured in, shouting. The warden raised his weapon again, but the radios on their belts came alive, replaying his own voice, admitting everything. Hayes was supposed to hand over the drive. He refused. The Blood Key program was built to control, not expose. The guards froze. The warden looked around, cornered by his own words. Cross stood, bleeding but defiant. It's over. The warden's expression twisted into something darker. You think this ends with me? He said softly. You have no idea how deep it goes. Before anyone could move, the warden turned the gun on himself, and the yard went silent. Cross fell to his knees, the drive still clutched in his hand, the alarms wailing like sirens of justice and guilt. Hayes had been right all along. The system was rotten, and now the rot was finally bleeding out into the open. But as medics rushed in and guards shouted orders, Cross noticed one last thing. The USB drive's tiny light was still blinking. Someone, somewhere, was still accessing it remotely. The sirens echoed through the yard, a deafening mix of chaos and confusion. Cross lay on the cold asphalt, his blood seeping into the cracks, his hands still wrapped around the blinking USB drive. Paramedics shouted for clearance, guards scrambled for control, and through it all, the prison's PA system blared an automated announcement. Facility lockdown initiated. All personnel report to secure zones immediately. Cross tried to speak, but pain stole his voice. He could feel consciousness slipping, the edges of his vision dimming, until a medic's voice cut through the noise. We got a pulse. He's alive. Then, darkness. When Cross woke, he was in the prison's infirmary. His shoulder was bandaged, his arms strapped to and fore. The room was quiet, too quiet. He looked to his right. A uniformed officer sat nearby, face hidden behind a clipboard. You gave us quite a scare, the man said. His tone was smooth, almost rehearsed. Cross squinted. Where's the drive? The officer looked up, smiling faintly. Evidence. Safe and sound. Cross's chest tightened. Who are you? The man set the clipboard down and leaned forward. His badge read, Internal Affairs Division, Special Oversight. My name's Agent Monroe, he said. We've been monitoring the Blood Key case for a long time. You and Hayes stumbled into something bigger than either of you could handle. Cross forced himself upright. You knew? You knew, and you did nothing. Monroe's eyes stayed fixed on him. You weren't clear to know, officer, but now you're part of it. Before Cross could respond, Monroe reached into his coat pocket and placed the USB drive on the bedside table. Its light was still blinking. Tell me, Cross said quietly, why is it still active? Monroe smirked. Because someone else logged in. He handed Cross a small tablet, showing a single line of data. User 001, active session /remote node. Washington, D.C. Cross's pulse quickened. Who's user 001? Monroe stood, buttoning his coat. Let's just say, not everyone in this operation wore a uniform. The agent turned toward the door. Rest up, Daniel. You're being transferred first thing tomorrow. New assignment. New identity. You'll be safer there. Safer. Cross rasped. Or silenced. Monroe paused at the doorway, his silhouette framed by the dim hallway light. That depends on what you decide to do next. The door shut softly behind him. Cross stared at the blinking USB drive. The screen on the tablet refreshed. New text appeared. Incoming message. Hayes didn't die for nothing. His throat tightened. His hand trembled as he typed a reply. Who are you? There was a pause. Then the next line appeared. The same people Hayes was working with. You have 24 hours to decide if you're with us or with them. The tablet screen went black. Cross sat in silence, the weight of the drive heavy in his palm. Outside, he could hear the faint echo of footsteps, precise, controlled, like someone standing guard just beyond the door. He looked toward the small window, the gray dawn rising over Pelican Bay, and whispered to himself, Hayes, where did you start? The USB drive blinked one last time, then flashed green. Somewhere far beyond the prison, a secure connection opened, and a classified folder named Operation Blood Key. Phase 2 began to download. The morning light bled through the blinds of the infirmary, turning the sterile white walls into a dull gray haze. Cross hadn't slept. The USB drive sat on the tray beside him, its light pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. He replayed Monroe's words in his mind. You're part of it now. He didn't trust internal affairs, and he sure as hell didn't trust whatever new assignment they had planned. If Hayes had died for this, then someone had to finish it, and that someone was him. Cross disconnected his grabbed the drive, and moved to the door. It was unlocked. Too easy, like they wanted him to leave. The hallway was deserted. Cameras tracked him as he passed, but no alarm sounded. When he reached the end of the corridor, a nurse looked up from her desk, expressionless, as if she'd been waiting for him. Officer Cross, she said quietly. Someone left this for you. She slid an envelope across the counter. Inside was a folded note and a visitor's pass marked Main Admin / Sublevel 3. The note was short, typed in courier font. Hayes didn't die in vain. Follow the signal. Sublevel 3 wasn't on any map he'd seen, but Cross found the elevator that led there, an old freight lift behind the storage wing. The button for 3 was scratched out, yet when he pressed it, the lift rumbled to life. The doors opened into a dimly lit operations room. Multiple monitors flickered, each showing live feeds from prisons across the country. Pelican Bay, San Quentin, Attica, Florence ADX. At the center of the room sat a single workstation, connected to a massive, encrypted terminal. The same blinking green icon glowed at the bottom corner, blood key active. Welcome, Officer Cross. The voice came from the shadows. Agent Monroe stepped forward, but his badge was gone. He wasn't wearing government insignia anymore, just a plain black tactical vest. I knew you'd come, he said. You were meant to. Cross clenched his jaw. You set me up. You killed Hayes. Monroe shook his head. Hayes made a choice, just like you're about to. He gestured to the monitor. You think Blood Key was about covering up crimes? No, it was about control. A network of prisons, officers, and private contractors, moving money, weapons, and information. The warden was a pawn. The real power sits higher than you can imagine. Cross's voice hardened. And you work for them. I work with them, Monroe said, stepping closer. But you? You could help reshape it, clean it from the inside, or expose it and vanish like Hayes. He placed a small black device on the console, a detonator linked to the servers. The system is wired into every major corrections database in the U.S. You press this, it all goes offline. Millions of records wiped. Chaos. Cross stared at it, torn between rage and duty. Hayes's voice echoed in his head. They know what I found. You're giving me a choice? He asked. Monroe nodded. You always had one. Cross took a long breath. Then here's mine. He slammed the USB drive into the main console. The screens erupted with code, lines of encrypted data racing faster than the system could contain. Firewalls collapsed. Back doors opened. "Daniel, what the hell are you doing?" Monroe shouted, lunging forward. Cross turned toward him, eyes burning with fury. Finishing what Hayes started, he pressed enter. Every monitor turned white. Alarm screamed. The blood key system, years of corruption, blackmail, and hidden control, was being broadcast to every federal and state network in real time. Monroe raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the entire room shook. The servers overloaded, sparks flying. Cross dove behind the console as an explosion ripped through the sublevel. When the smoke cleared, fire crews found the wreckage of the operations room. No sign of Monroe. Cross's badge was found near the center console, scorched but intact. A week later, a package arrived at a journalist's desk in San Francisco, unmarked, containing only a USB drive labeled Pelican Bay, the blood key files. Within hours, the story went global. Headlines spread across the world: corruption, cover-ups, and a secret program that had been manipulating the U.S. prison system for over a decade. Federal investigations were launched. Dozens of officers were indicted. But Daniel Cross was never found. Some said he died in the blast. Others whispered he escaped before the explosion, carrying one final copy of the files. And sometimes, when the guards walk the outer yard of Pelican Bay, they swear they can still hear a voice through the static of the intercom. Tell Hayes it's over. If you made it this far, you've just uncovered one of the darkest secrets ever hidden behind prison walls. But here's the real question. Do you think Daniel Cross made out alive? Drop your theory in the comments, hit like, and subscribe for more true crime stories that dive deep into the shadows where truth and silence collide. Because in this world, some disappearances are never accidents.